What is power vote? So first off, I want to put in context the difference between power vote and the polling system Danny was just talking about. The polling system in Polis is really designed to help facilitate discussions. There's no binding choices people are making. If you're voting things up or voting things down, it's not really a ratification of any major governance changes. It's just a way for you to express your opinion and for the community to better understand how that opinion matches up with the opinions of other people. For somewhere near the end of the FIP process, once we've got a FIP written, we're looking to see if the community actually agrees with this specific test, this specific proposal. We've got something called Power Vote. And so Power Vote is a smart contract-based voting tool that we've been working on for a while. It implements most of the different stakeholder categories that Danny was talking about before in the original governance FIP. Doesn't implement one. I'll get into why later. But this is a screenshot of what the app looks like right now. So we just opened a proposal on vote.phil.org that says Filecoin should support voting in its FIP governance process. Um, I'll do a little live demo later. But I wanted to explain some of the features that are going on behind the scenes so you understand, how this tool works and why it's a good choice for our governance process. So first, all of these actions are completed via the smart contract. So if we go back to the screen, we can see here that there's a couple of proposals that were currently live. There's these 3 test proposals that I created over the last couple of days, one of which has some votes on it and was rejected. And then if you look at the actual smart contract interactions from my MetaMask wallet here, you can see that the times of these interactions, the contract interactions, all correspond to when I created new proposals. And the vote is actually when I voted on one of those proposals. So all of this action happens via smart contract. There's a transparent ledger of every single action people are taking that we can look through after the fact and use as part of the counting process. So all of our FIP editors here are managed via smart contract. So currently I'm not actually a FIP editor, but because I deployed the contract, I currently have permissions. I've added Danny and Adrian as some of the first FIP editors, but all of the approval process for new FIP editors, they're actually roles specific in the contract. They're the only people who are able to create new proposals for this contract. And all of the FIP editors have to go through a unanimous approval process. So all of the other FIP editors have to issue on-chain messages that says that they endorse a particular wallet address as having belonged to a particular FIP editor, and that everyone's in agreement on who the FIP editors actually are. This matches the sort of off-chain in-person process that we already use, which is that all FIP editors have to approve new FIP editors. And we just took that existing process, we didn't change it at all, and we made a smart contract that can handle that configuration. You can see down here in the power percentage, we can set the configurable weights between the 4 different stakeholder classes. So originally the 5 classes that the FIP governance reform proposal included was the storage provider class, the client class, the developer class, the token holder class, and the ecosystem class. And those 5 classes were based on the original Filecoin white paper. We eventually realized that it wasn't clear what constituted a member of the ecosystem, at least not clear enough to have a robust counting algorithm backing that stakeholder class. So we've removed that for now. And as Danny said, for this initial test, we just want to do exclusively focus on token holders. And so for this initial proposal, I set the token holder percentage to 100%. That means that only the votes cast in the token stakeholder class are going to count for this particular proposal. But in future proposals, we can add the SP class, we can add the client class, we can add the developer class. The SP class is the power is calculated based on the storage power that storage providers are providing to the ecosystem. In terms of the client class, it's based on how much data each client wallet or client wallet address has uploaded to the network. And the developer class is really intended to kind of be a one developer, one vote style system. And we link it to people's GitHub accounts, and we ensure that those GitHub accounts have a history of participation in Filecoin ecosystem repositories in order to count in this one developer, one vote category. We also have in advance, we have to set the opening time for the proposal, and that's because all of the votes are actually time lock encrypted until the voting period ends. This is a huge question of how can you do a transparent and auditable voting system on smart contracts while also keeping how people voted private. And we opted to go for a time lock encryption method because that means that all of the votes will be private for the length of the election. But after the end of the election, everything will be totally public so that everybody can transparently verify the results of a particular election. There are other methods like what the Ethereum Foundation is working on. They have a system called Macy that provides more privacy even after the vote is starts counting, but it's not as obvious to the community how that count is being performed. There's, one usually centralized counting service that has the permission to view all of the vote results, and that's the only they can issue proofs that they counted correctly, but it's not, all of the data isn't publicly available in the way ours is. So that does mean that, your vote in this system is going to be publicly displayed at the end of any of these votes. So just something to keep in mind, especially if you link your developer ID to a particular wallet address, you might want to have a different wallet address that has a lot of your tokens in it that you use for voting that isn't as attached to your identity if you want to maintain a little bit of anonymity. We also created both a UI and CLI interface. So in particular, the voting UI allows connection via Ledger and connection via MetaMask. That supports F1 addresses stored in a Ledger, and it supports F4 addresses in MetaMask. For native addresses like F1 and F3, we needed a CLI-based approach that storage providers could use to vote with their storage provider wallets without necessarily removing those wallets and installing them into MetaMask or installing them into a ledger. So instead, we created this voting CLI tool. It connects to a running Lotus node. It uses the built-in Lotus node wallet management system. So if you already have your storage provider wallets installed on a Lotus node somewhere, you can just connect to that Lotus node over RPC, issue all of your votes, view proposals, and issue votes from the CLI. And you can find that CLI in the on-chain voting repo. I'll provide a link to that repo later, but it's Filecoin project/on-chain voting. So we also need your help. This is the initial version. It's a very early alpha version of this voting tool. And there are still some large open questions. So what should we do about F2 multisig addresses? It's not even clear from a governance perspective how that should happen. Should we, allocate some percentage of the tokens to each of those addresses and allow them to vote independently? Should we say that the multisig it works similarly to a token allocation where you need 3 of 6 people to vote in favor of a proposal in order for it to be considered approved? There's a lot of open questions with how multisig should behave in a system like this. There's also some open questions for the client and developer categories. So, I took this equal weight voting proportions diagram from Danny's slide earlier, and the ecosystem category no longer exists because we couldn't figure out how to calculate it. The client deal bytes category, we were using the deal bytes of the data onboarding deals, but with direct data onboarding, that deal bytes field isn't present anymore. And so there's open questions about how we can actually calculate accurately how much data a particular client has uploaded in order to give them the correct power in this category. And then there's also always questions about, whether a one developer, one vote system that relies on GitHub for identity verification is really the right solution. There's been a lot of attempts over the years to do GitHub-based reputation systems in open source communities, and all of those different approaches have had their share of challenges. So if you have any ideas on what a good way to measure developer contributions is and potentially assign power to developers in this governance system, please put those ideas in one of the open polls we have on poll.phil.org. And then one of the other questions is, do we allow collateral and staked fill as part of token counts? So, many people put much of their fill in, in a storage provider. They have it locked up for a long period of time, making storage deals, or they have a large amount of staked fill in something like Glyph or another staking platform. Should we count? Should Glyph be able to vote on behalf of all of the fill that they have staked, or should we each, as stakers in Glyph, be granted some share of governance in exchange for our iFill Glyph tokens? Those are one of the other open categories, open questions about how we calculate the stakeholder power. And so, like I said at the beginning, you can vote now. So vote.phil.org is where this tool has been deployed. There is an open proposal. That open proposal is going to stay open until day one of FDS 6 Toronto. And then on day two, between day one and day two, that proposal is going to close. The counting service is going to start counting the votes that we cast overnight. And then on day two of FDS Toronto, we'll review the results of the vote. And we'll talk about what it means as a community, how the test went, what problems we encountered. There are still, I was using the app just yesterday, there's still some small bugs here and there. We ask for your patience as you're trying it out. One of them in particular, it asks you to attach your MetaMask wallet very early on in the process, even if it doesn't look like you did anything MetaMask related. Totally, it just means that we're asking in the wrong place. We probably need to shift that to make it more clear when you're actually attaching your MetaMask wallet. As you encounter stuff like that, leave an issue on Filecoin project /onchain voting, or go ahead and send us an email directly. You can send it to ian@phil.org. You can send it to Danny. You can hit us up on Slack. Really, any feedback you have, we would love to get from you. And now I was inspired by Danny, so I think I'm going to try to do a live demo as well.
No.
So this is the voting tool here. So I'm actually on the proposal screen here. If I go back, I can see this full list of proposals that I saw before. I've already attached my MetaMask wallet up here, and I have 0.146 fill in this particular wallet, which should be enough to cast a vote. So if I go here to in progress, I'm now going to approve this because I do think voting should be part of the FIP governance process. I think just having a small group of core developers decide the FIPS without my personal input in the vote isn't something that I want. So I'm going to approve this vote. You probably can't actually see this because I think I'm only sharing my Firefox screen, but it's popped up the MetaMask extension right now. I just confirmed, and now that I confirmed, you can see the vote successful banner that showed up at the top of this application. So I've now voted. And as you can see, the application puts a little voted banner on top of that proposal for me to show me that I've voted. But no one is going to be able to read the contents of my vote until day two of FDS Toronto, because it's gotten time lock encrypted using DRAND. I can go look at the message on chain if I want to. I'm actually let me click on one of these messages here. So this is actually the Philfox message that corresponds to a vote. So it's not super clear. There's DAG CBOR encoded data in this, so it's not clear from this block explorer exactly what the internals of my vote were. A lot of the data, like I said, is time lock encrypted, so you can't really see anything. But I can see on chain that my vote was definitely cast, which is one of the interesting things about our tool and our approach.